join me in welcoming Annette to the stage.
Is this the clicker? All right. Cool. Good morning, and welcome to my presentation. It's a great honor for me to be here today to introduce you to some of the interesting trends that Gartner is seeing over the next few years. I'm going to discuss this morning 5 of Gartner's top predictions for 2016. Those are our mega trends, so really encompassing many different areas, not only AR and VR, but also I'm also going to talk a little bit about Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. So I hope my presentation will give you maybe some new perspectives on these mega trends that we're looking at in the next few years, and also some ideas how to deal with them, actually. Because if we want it or not, we need to deal with those mega trends. So going right into it, first prediction. By 2018, 20% of all business content will be authored by machines. So this sounds interesting. So we will be writing content, or content will be written by non-humans. So where is this coming from? How do we get to this bold statement? Well, some of it is, if we look at it, already happening on a small scale in some areas. If we, for example, look at specific industries, for example, the publishing industry. You probably have heard of the famous LA Times in the US using a program called QuakeBot. And QuakeBot is a little artificial intelligence machine or a smart machine, whatever you want to call it, which can, after only a few minutes after an earthquake has happened, report on the facts, and without much human interaction, it gets published online. So these are small things that are happening today, but those systems will become much more intelligent. And if we go now outside of this specific industry and look at more general business context, there are large organizations here in Europe and elsewhere in the world that are using those kind of machines, smart machines already, to produce annual reports or quarterly reports. So this is really about a program that is able to gather data points from different databases and make comprehensible text out of it that a human can read. And obviously, the big advantage here is that these machines can do that so much faster than we will ever be able to. So there's a company called EasyUp, and they claim that their machine can produce 3,000 pages per second. So just imagine how fast that is. And obviously, this has implications for all of us. It means, on the one hand, we can be more productive, but maybe on the other hand, those machines are competing with us on some of our job functions, I guess. So we all need to think about here in this audience, how does this impact us? I also have to think about this. I'm an analyst, so that means I do some talking, but I also do a lot of writing. I need to write a lot of reports. So maybe in a few years, I will have my own little robo-writer who will basically do some reporting, taking some data out of a database and create some text, and I can actually focus on the more important things, for example, developing better forecast models, or thinking about the future, which are maybe things that our machines are not able to do yet. So basically, we all need to think about this, and it will definitely impact our business in the future. Leading up to the next prediction here today, I'm going to shift gear a little bit, and we're going to talk about Internet of Things. You probably all have heard about this Internet of Things thing that is going to explode in the next few years. And one of the predictions we have is that by 2021, we will have 1 million new things connected per hour per day. So that's a huge amount. Today, we're looking about at 6 billion things, and by 2020, well over 20 billion connected things. And these things are, they're forming systems and subsystems, and they will either trigger alerts, or they will trigger events, or events will trigger some kind of alert in these systems, which means, something, the things around us in our home, in the streets, they will tell us that something needs to happen. For example, my car will tell me it needs an oil change or whatever it is. So with all these things around us, if you think about 20 billion things, there's no way we could actually interact with all of these events that are being triggered. So the question here is, are we ready for 20 billion things being connected? So this leads now to the next prediction here, which says by 2018, 6 billion connected things will be requesting support. So I just said 20 billion or over 20 billion things by 2020, a little less maybe by 2018, and 6 billion things of those will be asking for support. You can imagine that we all will be interacting with 6 billion things and that there's human interaction necessary. So the change here I'm talking about is that in the future, a lot of automation will need to happen. Simple example, where basically no human interaction is necessary, that these things will act on our behalf, basically. So maybe in my connected home, the connected things around me will monitor the food that I have inside for my pet. And just before I run out of food for my dog, it will actually place an order and the food will come to my house without me interacting. So what that means actually in the end is that it's a very different way we will look at conducting business in a few years from today, because we are actually interacting more with things than maybe with humans. So things are becoming customers, so to say. And that's a theme that we also discuss quite a bit in Gartner at the moment. So what does that mean, and how do I interact with those things, or how do I market maybe my products to things? What does that mean? And of course, there are lots of issues still around that, there will be issues and questions like, will these things actually, do they really represent what I really wanted? Do I really want to place an order for new dog food, or can I interact fast enough to maybe stop a process and things like that? Obviously, the algorithm that we create, is something that, we're still creating, and they will follow whatever, the wish I have. But, there will be issues where systems might be faster than humans. And in general, as I said, it's going to be very different business than today. So the next one is fun. This is a dog from my colleague. I borrowed that picture. And with some Photoshop, the question, if you ask someone who has a dog, can you imagine that if you found out that your dog was an android and not a real dog, would you still be able to love this dog? And the first reaction would be, no, that's strange. But there are actually people in this world who get really attached to their robo-dogs, believe it or not. But still, most people would say you can't relate it, or they can't relate to it. But the question I really want to ask today is, what if you found out that your boss was a robot? Would you still want to report to him? So obviously the reaction here is even stronger. That's something that is probably not something we can really relate to. And so this leads up to the third prediction today. By 2018, more than 3 million workers globally will be supervised by a robo-boss. So how did we get to this bold statement? The idea here is that most of our jobs can be assessed in some quantifiable output. So, the number of reports I have to write as an analyst, or the number of questions I need to answer to clients, all of this is, quantifiable output, and it can be measured. So why not put a robot or some smart machine to assessing my performance? And that's something that we're already seeing on a small scale today. For example, if we look at the sports industry, the professional sports, they're analyzing in a very complex way the way they're performing, and analyzing the competing team, where are their strengths and weaknesses, and how can I beat that team maybe next time I encounter it. So this is the type of thing that we're not saying, I guess, that in a few years all our CEOs will be robots, no. But we're envisioning right now that there could be a codependence, or like a co-work experience between some smart machine and a human leader in a team, and they work together. So the machine works on or analyzes the quantifiable output, while the human manager focuses on the human-related aspects of leadership, which is something that machines can't do. So obviously, that again, we'll probably see some pushback in a way or the other. But it's something that we envision, and that is already happening among us today on a small scale. So next topic is wearables. It's a topic that I follow very closely in Gartner. We have a forecast that shows that by 2020, about 500 million units of different wearables will be shipped. And also our consumer surveys show that this year, the adoption of smartwatches and fitness bands has doubled over the last year. So it's still quite a strong and growing trend. Everybody's looking, to health and, the quantified self. You've heard that word a million times. And all these wearables are now entering the enterprise scene. So there are wearables that we know from the consumer side that are entering the enterprise space, but there are also very specific new devices that are being developed by different companies, very specifically for the enterprise use. And of course, that has big implications because these wearables suddenly now, they are collecting data, very sensitive data that hasn't been collected before. So obviously, organizations need to be very careful around privacy issues, and obviously, if you give such a wearable or if your employees need to wear those, there's going to be some resistance. But nevertheless, we're predicting, this is number 4, by 2018, 2 million employees will be required to wear health and fitness tracking devices to actually do their job. So there are 2 big trends that we're currently observing that are driving this prediction. One is what we call corporate wellness programs. Corporate wellness programs are those where someone in an organization is wearing a Fitbit and they get a discount on their health plan. And this is all obviously coming very strongly from the US right now. Restructuration of the whole industry there, Obamacare and all that is driving that. And we're seeing now this idea being also transferred to other areas. The other big trend we're seeing currently is really around worker safety and compliance. So keeping your employees safe if they work in hazardous environments. And this is where those specific wearables I talked about earlier are coming in. So I was in Australia, and a few months ago, I talked to an interesting company called SmartCap. And SmartCap has developed a little device that you can wear under your head, and it measures or monitors your EEG. So it will tell you, the system will tell you once you get too tired to do your job, and you will stop driving or stop doing whatever you're doing. And this is already being deployed in some of the larger organizations in Australia. It's currently being tested in hospitals in the UK. So those kind of trends and those kind of new devices are coming now into the enterprise. And of course, 2 million employees might not be a lot. So what it's actually saying here, this statement, is that not every one of us will have such a, would have the obligation to wear something like that, but there will be very specific areas where this will be necessary, just as necessary as, wearing a seatbelt when we're driving, where it makes sense. So specific areas, not everyone, but there will be certain requirements. And of course, there will be pushback from employees who probably are not very happy to wear something like that. Specific regions will also need to find specific solutions to that. And now finally talking about a very specific wearable, head-mounted displays. And before we get to the last prediction, let me first share quickly some data with you. This is our forecast for head-mounted displays. As you see, very small volumes right now, but then ramping up in 2020 to 40 million units. The reason still very small, and you probably all know this quite well, this market anyways. So I think 2016 is really the year where we've seen lots of interesting new devices in the consumer space, especially coming to market. So next year we should see some ramp up in that area as well. And in enterprise, we're currently in Gartner, we're observing lots of new use cases, very interesting questions coming from our clients to ask about, how to implement AR/VR solutions. So, but a lot of them are still in piloting phase, but those will also hopefully, see the next stage very soon. And just quickly, the red part here in 2016, smartphone VR, those are the devices that are, to us, more accessories, so where you slot in a smartphone. Those are not really part of the forecast here, so those would go on top. And as you can see, those are definitely outselling this year. we still keep kind of track of them. So we're forecasting about 6 or 7 million or even more by the end of the year just of those accessories, because they're so cheap. You know, you can get one for 30 euros. And it's the first way of, it's like kind of an entry-level kind of device where users, consumers are for the first time experience virtual reality. And I think this is a good segue to the next years where they will actually buy a proper unit of those devices. So our last prediction for today, by 2019, AR, VR, and mixed reality immersive solutions will be evaluated and adopted in 20% of large enterprises. So we do see there's a good opportunity for AR and VR in enterprise for sure. As I said, we're seeing lots of very interesting use cases at the moment, but there's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done. And one of the things that we're observing in interviews with our clients is that there's still quite lack of expertise inside organizations of how to implement AR and VR solutions and integrate them into existing processes and integrating them into existing IT management systems. So you here as the audience, or some of you are technology providers, you need to think about, how can I be, a strong partner for my enterprise clients? How can I provide this expertise? How can I provide maybe, consulting services next to the technology I provide to make these projects successful? So with that, I covered a lot of different topics in 15 minutes, but I hope this was, give you some new thoughts on, these mega trends that we're seeing in the next few years. I think our job is to look at these trends and make the best out of it and take the positive sides. And if we do that, then the future is ours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annette. So I can assure you I'm not a robot sitting here. So I just want to ask a question about the relationship between artificial intelligence and AR and VR. How do you see these two coming together?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of touch points between those two. But artificial intelligence is a very broad term. There can be so many things, so we're not going to talk about definitions here, but maybe 2 examples. One is, if we look at AI, artificial intelligence, Cortana, Siri, Watson, those are all types of AI. And so these kind of systems are developing, and there are actually very good, artificial intelligence examples to be linked to AR and VR. For example, if you look at HoloLens, HoloLens is designed to be using Cortana. So, hands-free, and you interact with Cortana for intuitive web search or completing actually full tasks. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the examples, obviously. And then the other example would be, for example, what Intel has been showing to us the last 2 years. This year at IDF, there was everything was around AR and VR, and they launched their project Alloy. They had mounted display, and obviously Intel is developing lots of different AI systems, and that is directly linked to computer vision. They use it in robots that roll around, and with the help of computer vision, they know where to go. And of course, this is part of artificial intelligence.
Okay, and if we take a look at the enterprise and AR, VR, and mixed reality, you mentioned that one of the predictions is the adoption of this technology. What would you say are some of the criteria that enterprises would be using to assess this?
Yeah, so we've conducted a few interviews with organizations in Asia to see what are their criteria when they select an AR, VR system. And it was quite interesting and maybe very obvious, but it totally depends on the use case and the industry you're in, what your needs are. They can be completely different. Obviously, if you need a system, a head-mounted display, for example, for assembly workers, you need different hardware than for someone who needs to do, outside field work, going inside, outside. You probably, maybe want a display that adjusts to bright sunlight, and then inside you can still see enough. They all definitely talk about, it needs to be a headset that is lightweight, so you can wear it more than 10 minutes. Battery life is always an issue. So those are some of the criteria that are being considered. And you probably also should look at the business case, because you don't want to approach this from the technology angle, but really from the business angle. That's one of the key findings we had in these interviews, that if you really want to solve a business problem with an AR, VR solution, and not put a lot of technology, the most technology you can find into such a headset, but you really want to solve one specific business problem. For example, be more efficient, or talk back when you're someone is outside and someone else is seeing what you are seeing. This is kind of the most frequent use case at the moment. Look over the shoulder kind of thing. To have someone else understanding and working with you, even though he's remote. So those are the most successful, actually, that where you really approach it from a business sense kind of way.
Okay, and I know your fourth prediction, I believe, was around the mandated use of wearable technology. Mm-hmm. How do you see the relationship between wearables and AR and VR? We talked a little bit about voice, but are there other ways that you're seeing these parts come together?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's another thing that also Intel showcased with, when you have mixed reality, you probably have, some kind of other wearable on your hands where you can interact with your environment or inside that virtual reality. So those kind of new extra add-on kind of wearables will be coming also to the market. We also have a little forecast that we just published around wearables, specifically kind of like remote controls for AR and VR systems. So this is definitely, it's a small market and a very nascent market, mm-hmm. but that's for sure something that is also coming to market as a way of interacting or helping with those kind of experiences.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, on the RoboBosses, what were some of the reactions from folks that either you talked to or through your interviews when you bring up this very disruptive idea that we will be taking mm-hmm. orders from our robot masters quite soon? Yeah,
it's a bit like the mixture of high doubt and, oh yeah, we knew this is going to be Terminator, or whatever right. you want to call it. But I think that the strongest reaction I'm normally getting from actually the first prediction around the content writing or the content written by machines, because that's something that's obviously, someone, when I presented this in Australia, someone raised their hand and was like, yeah, well, I'm a writer, and I'm going to be out of a job in the next few years. And well, there is going to be, or we are, as I said on my slide, we can probably look at some job freezes in certain publishing areas, for example, or there is going to be, or there are already being lots of efficiency being created in larger organizations, producing content with machines. So, but it also has, its good sides, obviously. The productivity increases, but also, the focus. And I was trying to explain, you should be focusing on the more challenging things, like thinking, like I said, thinking about new forecasting models and things that machines cannot do. Which is obviously more fulfilling normally in a job than looking through a pile of, for example, in accounting. There's another example. Some banks are using this artificial intelligence already to make sure that all the bills are correct from their customers. And doing that manually is just a nightmare. But right. You can move on to more interesting parts of your job.
Okay, amazing. Big round of applause for Annette, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.